There is a specific kind of dread that comes with Medicare enrollment. Not the fear of choosing the wrong plan, but something earlier than that. The fear that somewhere in this system, a clock has already been ticking, and nobody told you when it started. That feeling is not paranoia. There is a clock. It started on your 65th birthday. And for most people who turn 65, nobody, not their employer, not their doctor, not their HR department, ever mentions what happens if you miss the window it's measuring. Here is what today's video is going to do. It's going to show you exactly what that window is, what the penalty actually costs over the course of a retirement, and the one situation where missing the window carries no penalty at all, and the 3 situations people mistake for that one. By the end of this, you will know exactly where you stand. And if you're watching this before your 65th birthday, you'll be one of the few people who walked into this with a map instead of a letter and a deadline. Let's start with the structure, because it matters. When you become eligible for Medicare, which for most people is the month you turn 65, a window opens. It is called the initial enrollment period. It is 7 months long, 3 months before your birthday month itself, 3 months after. That's it, 7 months. And the timing of when you sign up inside that window actually affects when your coverage begins. If you enroll in the first 3 months before your birthday month, your coverage starts on the first of your birthday month. If you wait until your birthday month or after, your start date shifts forward. For Part B, a late window sign-up can mean 2 to 3 months without coverage, even though you technically enrolled on time. So the window is not just sign up before it closes. There's a right end and a more right end. Now, what happens if you miss the 7 months entirely? There is a fallback called the general enrollment period. It runs every year from January through March. And if you sign up during it, your coverage doesn't begin until July 1st. That is a gap of months between when you apply and when you're covered. And it comes with something else, the penalty. The word you're going to hear throughout this video is creditable coverage. That word is doing a lot of work, and it deserves a real definition before we go any further. Creditable coverage means health insurance or drug coverage that meets Medicare's minimum standard. That is, coverage expected to pay at least as much as Medicare would. Your employer's plan through a large company usually qualifies. Most VA coverage qualifies. TRICARE for military families qualifies. 3 things that do not qualify and that catch an enormous number of people are coming later in this video. Keep that word in mind, creditable. Here is where it gets important. The Medicare late enrollment penalty is not a fine. It is not a one-time fee you pay and move on from. It is a permanent monthly increase on your premium every month for as long as you have Medicare. For Part B, that's your outpatient medical coverage, your doctor visits. The penalty is 10% of the standard premium for every full 12-month period you could have enrolled but didn't. In 2026, the standard Part B premium is $185 a month. If you missed your window by 2 full years, your premium is not $185, it's $222. That's $37 more every month for the rest of your life. And here's the part that most people find hardest to absorb. That $37 number is calculated against the 2026 premium. The Part B premium rises most years. As the base premium climbs, your penalty amount climbs with it, because the penalty is a percentage, not a fixed dollar figure. A 20% penalty today means 20% of whatever the premium becomes in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20. Over a 20-year retirement, a 2-year delay on Part B could cost you close to $10,000 in accumulated penalty premiums, not for anything you chose. For a window nobody drew for you, Part D, prescription drug coverage, works differently, but the result is the same, permanent. The Part D penalty is 1% of the national base premium for every month you went without creditable drug coverage. Missed 24 months, you carry a 24% penalty. In 2026 dollars, that's about $9 extra a month, every month on top of your plan premium, even if you switch plans. Both penalties follow you. They don't expire after a few years. They don't get forgiven if you can show it was an honest mistake. The appeals process exists, but the bar for overturning a penalty is narrow and almost never met by "I didn't know." That's not the viewer's failure, that's the gap in what the system ever required anyone to explain. Now, Here is where the picture changes. There is one situation where you can delay Medicare enrollment past your initial enrollment period, past 65, and pay zero penalty. If you are still actively working at 65 and you have health coverage through your employer or through a spouse's employer, and that employer has 20 or more employees, you can delay Medicare enrollment without triggering the penalty. When your employment ends, or when that employer coverage ends, whichever comes first, a new window opens. It is called the Special Enrollment Period. It lasts 8 months. You can sign up for Part B during those 8 months and pay no penalty for the delay. 8 months, not 8 days, not 8 weeks. 8 months from the date coverage ends. That is the exception. One exception. And here is exactly where it collapses for a large number of people. The 3 situations that feel like the exception but aren't. Number 1. COBRA. If you retire at 65 and take COBRA to extend your employer coverage while you figure out Medicare, COBRA does not count. COBRA is not active employer coverage. It is continuation coverage you are paying for yourself. It does not earn you a special enrollment period. It does not shield you from the penalty. The 8-month clock for your special enrollment period started when your employment ended, not when your COBRA ends. This is the single most common and most expensive Medicare mistake that people make. Number 2. Retiree health benefits. Some employers offer coverage after retirement. It's a meaningful benefit and people understandably value it. But retiree coverage is not active employer coverage. It is not the same as being actively employed with employer insurance. It does not protect you from the late enrollment penalty. If you are relying on retiree benefits to delay Medicare without a penalty, you are in the same position as someone who has no coverage. Number 3. Marketplace plans. An ACA marketplace plan, even a comprehensive one, does not count as creditable coverage in the context of the Medicare Special Enrollment Period. If you're uninsured for Medicare purposes and you have a marketplace plan, the penalty clock is running. So, COBRA, retiree benefits, marketplace plans, none of them protect you. Active employer coverage from a company with 20 or more employees, that is the exception. Everything else is not. And there is one more detail worth naming. If your employer has fewer than 20 employees, the rules change even for active coverage. Small employer plans are typically secondary to Medicare at 65, meaning Medicare becomes your primary insurance whether you've enrolled or not. And if you haven't enrolled, you may face both penalty and coverage gaps simultaneously. The 20-employee threshold is not fine print. It's the dividing line. Here is the thing worth sitting with for a moment. The penalty didn't exist because you made a mistake. It exists because this information, the window, the exception, the 3 situations that look like the exception but aren't, was never delivered to you by anyone required to deliver it. Your HR department wasn't required to explain it. Your doctor's office wasn't required to explain it. The Social Security Administration mails you a card. Nobody mails you a map. What you're doing right now is receiving the map, and that changes what the next step looks like. One resource worth mentioning here. There is a Medicare Clarity Checklist linked in the description. It walks through every Medicare decision point, not just enrollment, but plan selection, the questions to ask before signing anything, and a plain language glossary of the terms that tend to trip people up. The penalty exists precisely because people go into this without a systematic guide to what comes when. That checklist was built to close that gap. Link is below if it's useful. Let's make this specific, because where you are right now determines what the right next step actually is. 3 scenarios. If you are approaching 65 and not yet enrolled, the first thing to do is identify your birthday month and count backward 3 months. That is the opening of your initial enrollment period. That is the date to begin. Signing up in those first 3 months before your birthday month gives you the cleanest coverage start date. If you're already in the window, sign up now. Don't wait for the last 3 months. Every week you wait inside the window increases the chance of a delayed start date, not just a penalty. Go to ssa.gov. That is where you apply for Medicare Part A and Part B, not the Medicare website, the Social Security Administration. You can complete the application online in under 30 minutes. If you are working past 65 and covered by an employer plan, the most important thing you can do in the next 48 hours is confirm 2 things with your HR department. First, does your employer have 20 or more employees? If yes, you are protected. If no, the rules are different. Ask HR specifically whether you are required to take Medicare as primary. Second, is your drug coverage considered creditable for Medicare Part D? Your employer is required by law to notify you of this annually. If you haven't received that notice, ask for it in writing. These 2 questions protect you from the most common employer coverage mistakes. If you are already past 65 and concerned, you may have missed something. Start by pulling your Medicare records. Log in at mymedicare.gov or call 1-800-MEDICARE. Look at your enrollment dates for Part B and Part D. If there is a gap, a period where you had neither Medicare coverage nor creditable employer coverage, that is where a penalty may have attached. If you believe a penalty was applied in error because you did have creditable coverage, but the records don't reflect it, you have the right to appeal. You have 60 days from the date of the penalty notice to file. The appeal requires documentation of the coverage you had. That means an annual creditable coverage notice from your employer or records from a VA, TRICARE, or other qualifying source. The appeal process is narrow. Most penalty applications are upheld, but if you genuinely had coverage and the records are incomplete, it is worth pursuing because you're not appealing a judgment call. You're correcting a factual error. And for anyone watching this who is somewhere in the middle, past 65, enrolled, but uncertain whether the plan decisions they made around enrollment were the right ones, that is a separate conversation from the penalty. The penalty is about timing. The plan decision is about fit. Both matter, but they're different questions. Today was the timing question. If today opens something you want to go deeper on, there's a Medicare Clarity checklist in the description. It covers every decision point with a deadline, in plain English, before you sign anything. Link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Drop a comment below. Were you aware of the penalty before today? And if not, what part of this would have been most useful to hear 3 years earlier? So here is where we've landed. The Medicare initial enrollment period is 7 months, centered on your 65th birthday. The first 3 months of that window give you the cleanest coverage start date. Miss the window entirely, and the penalty on Part B is 10% for every year of delay, permanent, compounding against a rising base. The Part D penalty is 1% per uncovered month, also permanent. The one clean exception is active employer coverage from a company with 20 or more employees. That earns you a special enrollment period, 8 months from the date coverage ends, with no penalty. COBRA does not count. Retiree benefits do not count. Marketplace plans do not count. If you're approaching 65, go to ssa.gov. Start the application in the first 3 months of your window. If you're working past 65, confirm the employee count and the creditable coverage status with HR in writing. If you're past 65 and concerned, check your enrollment dates at mymedicare.gov and determine whether a gap exists before it becomes a question someone else is asking on your behalf. That is the map. That is what nobody was required to give you, and what this video just did. There is a version of the Medicare enrollment process that people navigate in confusion, because a letter arrived and nobody explained what was in it, or because a deadline passed without anyone mentioning it existed. And there is a version where someone knew the window, knew the exception, knew the 3 things that look like the exception but aren't, and made the decision on purpose, with their eyes open, before the penalty had a chance to attach. The second version is what today was. One less thing to carry into this next chapter. I'll see you in the next one.